Recovery podcast is real-life stories from everyday people in recovery. From mental health issues, trauma, substance misuse, and behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for links to social media and a range of books written by your podcast host, Ren Coy.
Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast, episode 56, with me, Ren Coy. Apart from having a rather nasty cold, I'm doing really well and I hope you're doing well out there too. This episode of the podcast is with the recovery expert, Robb Kelly, who is the founder of Robb Kelly Recovery Group. And it's a really exciting one, this, for me, not only because Rob's got such a massive following out there in the United States and a platform to, get the message of recovery out to a much larger audience, but also because he's just a top bloke, and he's been doing what he's been doing for so many years. He's still helping people at a grassroots level. He hasn't let the fame overinflate his ego, and I just had an absolute ball talking to him. So I really hope that you enjoy listening to this podcast as much as I enjoyed talking with Robb.
Good to meet you. Fantastic. Hey guys, my name's Robb. I'm an alcoholic. Let me say that first. Get myself out there. Never used to like saying that in the old days, but it's so true today. I'm from Manchester, United Kingdom. I love Manchester. Born and bred. Manchester City fan, then turned to Manchester United despite my dad's disgrace. But I started drinking at the age of 9. I come from a musical family, and when I was on stage at 9, I was playing with my auntie and uncle on stage. And I loved it, don't get me wrong, but I suffered badly from my nerves. Very nervous child. And then one day we played Liverpool Irish Centre, and there was more people than we'd ever imagined there. And I just got stage fright. And I remember my uncle saying to me, here, take this couple of mouthfuls of this. And it was beer. And he gave me a beer, and I drank half a beer and half a pint. And as soon as I took it into my throat, my whole world just took off. I'd finally found something that took away the nerves, took away the embarrassment, took away the shyness. And all through my teens, I used it as a tool to speak to women, to go out on dates, to do stuff I've not really done. I applied for a session musician job in Stockport, Strawberry Studios, which is owned by 10cc. And I've always been an amazing bass player. It's like I'm like a savant. I'm good at two things: getting people well with addiction and playing music. And I got the job, played there for about 2 years, and then applied to Abbey Road for a bass player position. And after 7 auditions, I got the job. But I remember going for my first audition, and I was so nervous. I want to say about 18 at the time, 17, 18. And I stood outside Abbey Road, and there used to be a little newspaper shop down the road. So I went down there and grabbed a beer for my first interview. I went back home, waited for the letter, got the letter for the second one, went back on the train, and then I got 2 beers for the second interview, and then 3 beers for the third interview. And this went on for 7 auditions. So by the time I was waiting for my 7th audition, I had to drink 7 beers. And I went in, I don't remember a thing about it. But all I remember is a few weeks later, the letter comes saying I got the job, which told me that alcohol was my be and end all. It was the solution to all my problems. When I drank, I was the best person I could ever be. And that's what happened. You had some great times at Abbey Road. I played with David Bowie, Elton John and Queen, all them great guys. And but the alcoholism and the drug addiction started to take off as it got more vicious and vicious. And it just went downhill. It never went uphill. It always went downhill. I don't know what that's all about.
So what were you using at the same time as the alcohol then? Was it cocaine, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it was cocaine. I mean, I mean, we didn't pay for anything, especially when we were just in the studio. And I always remember finishing a session with Elton John. Went back to the Ritz Hotel up in the penthouse suite. It was pouring down and lightning and thunder and everything. And we went upstairs and we're just having a laugh and everything. And the coke was all around all the tables, and we're drinking. And next thing I heard Elton screaming in his bedroom, and I walked in, and he's on the phone to the reception. And I thought, what's going on? Something really bad must have happened here. And I'm listening to him, and this is what he's telling reception. If you don't stop the rain, and if you don't stop the thunder and lightning, I'm never going to book in this hotel again. That's how wasted we were. It was just crazy, crazy times, but very enjoyable, I must admit. Very enjoyable.
Deep in the insanity.
The insanity was absolutely crazy, but we didn't see it then. And that's one of my things in my teachings today is the definition of insanity for me is not being able to see my own truth, because I couldn't see how far down I was going with the addiction. I just couldn't see it, because wealth and a little bit of fame masked my alcoholism. The more I drank, the more I used, the more I got well known, and was wanting to do everything I can in the world, and it was just phenomenal.
So how did you go from being this bass player at Abbey Road to doing what you do now?
Well, there's a big piece of chunk missing, and that was when I went to Abbey Road. They were paying me $1,000 an hour back in the 80s, which is probably about 15,000 today an hour. So I was driving Porsches, and I had this idea that I wanted to be the first person in my family to go to college. So I became a Freemason. This was the big plan, because I'm an alcoholic and how to windle people who had contacts at Oxford, at Green's College, and I paid myself to go through Oxford, and I went through, and I come out, graduated, and then I got married, still drinking every day, didn't see it was a problem, and then I had the first kid, swore I'd never drink again. That lasted about 3 hours, and then we had the second child, swore on 2 Bibles, one in each hand, that I'd never drink again. Worst 7 hours of my life. Started drinking again after 7 hours, and then it all went to shit. And before I knew what day it was, I was sat on the streets in Piccadilly Gardens going, what the hell just happened? And I spent a year on the streets, and it was just absolutely horrible.
So how old were you at that point?
26, 27 when I went on the streets. So I just wanted
what had you studied at Oxford?
I studied psychology. Well, first of all, I went to be a doctor, an MD, but they threw me out the program after 6 months for turning up drunk every day. Yeah. So they said the only thing you've got to leave in disgrace, or you can be rediverted to our PhD program. So I got a doctorate in psychology, and only about 8 years ago in the US, I went for my second PhD in behavioral science. Yeah. Because I think that's a big part to play in recovery of how to read people and how to spot behavior change. So I actually have 2 PhDs, 1 master's, 1 bachelor's, and a bunch of other stuff.
So at the age of 27, you sat in Piccadilly Gardens. Is that at that point, had you lost your family, or were they still around, or? No,
they'd all gone. They just, my wife, I came downstairs one morning, about 2:00 in the morning, searching for my bottle of vodka that I'd lost. I was dying for a drink, and I'll come down to the kitchen, and I found it, and I grabbed the bottle and I put it on the side for a minute, because I'm looking for a crystal glass. This is how insane this shit is. I'm looking for a crystal glass to pour the vodka in, because I'm not going to drink it from the bottle, because that would be just crazy. That would mean I was an alcoholic. So I put it on the side for a second. I turned around and my wife followed me down, and she snatched the bottle off the side and she said, I think you've had enough. She was probably right, Ren, to be honest. Instead of going back up the stairs and going, okay, Mrs. Kelly, thank you. I'll get some more sleep before I go into work in 3 hours. I took a kitchen knife out and I stabbed her 3 times. And then I called the ambulance. And as I could hear the ambulance in the background. I jumped in the car and in a taxi, and I shot off to the airport, and I disappeared to Spain for 3 months. And the only reason why I'd come back is if she said she wouldn't press charges. Yeah. So I got an affidavit off and said she wouldn't press charges, and I came back. When I came back, she packed the bags and she took the kids. And I was like, no one takes the kids off me. So I got in touch with my attorney, and I said, I'll give you 25 grand if you get my kids back. So 8 o'clock next day, he was in court. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he brought my kids back. And I remember looking at him at ages 1 and 3 and going, oh, this feels awesome. And I give the guy the check. I took him into the front room. I sat him in front of the TV, and I went to the kitchen. And the thought hit me, I just have 1 beer to celebrate. And I remember opening the beer. Remember that sound? Yeah. 3 days later, when the police kicked the door down, The babies have not been changed nappies. They've not been fed. And there's like 20 bottles of vodka strewn around the floor in the house. I've obviously been to the liquor store, the off license, and I've not, they burst through the door and he served me with unfit fathers. And they took my kids off me and they went to the front door and I followed them. I was crying, because I couldn't believe what I did. And the eldest at 3 grabbed Mum's hand and she's walking down the pathway and she said, Daddy, please don't go. And then halfway down the path, she says, Daddy, please get better. And as they got to the gate, they opened the gate and she turned around one more time and says, Daddy, please stop drinking. And that's the last time I saw her. That's the last time I saw my youngest. I've never seen her since. And only 18 months ago did my eldest daughter get in contact with me. I've been back to England. I've held her. We spent some great time. I've held my granddaughter. But yeah, 6 months after that, she's actually said, Daddy, please stop drinking, which is the name of my book, which is awesome. We'll get into that later because that's why we called it that.
Yeah.
6 months after that, I'd lost everything. And I was sat on the streets. I remember sat on the bench right in the middle of Piccadilly Gardens and I was thinking, where did it all go wrong? Still not thinking I was an alcoholic, though. I was going to meetings, but I didn't fully concede to myself.
Yeah.
But it was crazy.
It's funny because being from Manchester and knowing Piccadilly Gardens very well, I've got a really good vision of you sat there. I mean, and especially because it is a place where, alcoholics and homeless people do congregate as well. So did you kind of become one of those people?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
That was me sat there and, sat on the grass, wasted, and then, trying to rob purses and stuff or rob stuff from the off license. And I went back there about 18 months ago, just after my daughter contacted, and we went back to Piccadilly Gardens with a photographer. I had my photographer with me, and I lay down on the exact bench, Ren, that I used to sleep on, and they took photographs, and my wife was crying. I mean, she couldn't stand it. She was, because I've only been married to her for about 5 years, so she doesn't know that side of me. And when I looked at the photographs after, it was haunting.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's super deep. That is like,
yeah, I know,
isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is so you're remarried now, are you?
I got remarried when I got over to the States. I've been married for about 5 years to an amazing girl.
Yeah. And so when you ended up on the streets at the age of 27, was that the end of your marriage then?
Yeah, it ended about a year before, to be honest. But yeah, that was the end. I signed everything over to her for the kids' sake. And I walked out with about £100, I think. And that was it. Went to my dad's. My mum and dad put me up for a bit. And I was with alcohol. So they threw me out. And then I went to friends and they threw me out. And then I ended up on the streets. I mean, nobody would even take a call from me. It was just so sad.
And how long were you on the streets then before you kind of got into formal recovery?
Probably about 14 months.
Yeah. And what did recovery look like for you then in those early days?
Well, I had a huge spiritual awakening on the streets one morning. I mean, it was pouring down. I was on Oldham Street, and there was a little side road just near offices, and I was walking down there. It was pouring down with rain. Someone had stole my trainers from the night before, so I was barefoot. I dropped down to my hands and knees. I started crying, just crying from my stomach, crying like a baby. And I remember I wasn't crying because I'd lost my wife or my kids or anything. I was crying because the first time in my life I realized I couldn't stop drinking. And it took all that for me to realize. I remember looking up to the sky and going, hey, if there's a God up there, I can't do this on my own anymore. And man, I'm telling you, it's like Piccadilly Gardens and Oldham Street. We're talking about one of them back roads behind all the shops.
Yeah.
And a guy walked down there with a little Bible in his hand. His name was Derek. And he said, hey, do you want help? And I said, yeah, I'm dying. And he took me back to his house. And he says, hey, you can come, you can stay as long as you want, but you've got to come to AA meetings with me. And that's what I did. I started going to AA meetings properly. And then found a guy, take me through the steps and stuff. And here I am today.
Was Derek in AA then?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
You see, I don't want to gloss over that, Rob, because, these are the types of miracles that happen. That I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Why is it? I mean, I don't know whether you'll have any sort of an answer to this, but I was asking the question of my friend and we were discussing it. Why is it that over and over and over again, you hear these stories? I mean, because the same thing happened to me. I got down on my knees at the end of my drinking and I prayed and I just said out loud, I can't do this anymore. And something just changed in that moment, and I hear these stories over and over again that when you actually surrender to your innermost self, as it says in that, blue book in Alcoholics Anonymous, that a spiritual awakening happens and people go on, to live these absolutely awesome lives. So what's going on there?
I'm so glad you said that, Ren, not gloss over it, because I've got two things to tell you here. So when it happened, right, I mean, I didn't know anything at the time. I just thought this guy was here. So he'd missed his last bus home from a Bible study. He was walking through Piccadilly Gardens, although he lived in Old Trafford. So he's walking through it, found me, took me back to his house. But then he took me to the meeting next day. And I'm like, I hate these meetings, man. I hate them. Everyone's sort of I just hated them. And about halfway around the circle, because we was going around in a circle, this guy said, my name's John and I'm a recovered alcoholic. And I'm like, what did he just say? And he kept talking about from the book, and he kept quoting from the book. And I'm like, there's no way does that say that in the book, that we can solve the drink problem. There's just no way. So after the meeting, I walked up to him and I said, will you sponsor me? And he said, no, but I'll be a spiritual advisor for 8 weeks or 12 weeks or something like that. So I said, okay. So what happened, bearing in mind that guy found me, that's the first miracle to happen to me. 30 seconds after I asked Ren, not a minute, not 2 hours, 30 seconds. So I met this guy and he said, get a dictionary and a big book and come to my house every Wednesday. And he told me to look for must words, messages, promises, and God words in the first 164. So I would look them all day, 4 pages a day. Then I'd walk to his house just outside Gorton. So it was a good hour walk for me. So I walked to his house, spent an hour with him, walked back. Every Wednesday I did that, Ren, every Wednesday. And he was showing me stuff in that book that I'd never seen. And I was quoting in AA what he'd shown me, and people were blown away. Then when I started working with people started to get well permanently. So I did this for 12 weeks. When I walked out that man's house, because we did the steps overnight, just like the book tells us to, after step 5, go home. When I walked out that man's house, I knew I'd never drink and use again as long as I continue what I'm going to do. But about 2 weeks after, I was in my own place. I got a little job, and it was phenomenal. So I was in the petrol station, and I thought, I'm going to get him a little card and a little teddy bear. It was like 50 pence. That's all I could afford. So I got it, and I wrote in the card, thank you, John, blah, blah, blah. And I walked back to the guy's apartment again, the guy's flat. And when I got there, I knocked on the door and there was no answer. And the woman next door opened the door and says, can I help you? And I said, yeah, can you tell me where John's moved to? And she said, and I quote, there's been no one in that apartment for at least 6 months. So I thought she was crazy. So when she closed the door, I went to the left-hand side and I knocked on that door. Now I'm getting a little bit scared. The guy comes to the door and I said, can you tell me where John's moved to? And he said, I've been here 2 years. That's been vacant for at least 2 years that I know of. So I'm like, what the hell's going on? So the next day, and this is where it started to get a bit aggressive. The next day I'm thinking, what? So I goes to the meeting where I met this guy. And I'd walked over near the the teapot when I asked him. And I said to this guy who was chairing, I said, do you remember yesterday the John guy that I spoke to? And he went, John. I said, yeah, white hair, white beard, the John guy. Said he was a recovered alcoholic. And he said, I don't think. I said, I was stood near the fucking tea thing, talking to him. You must remember. And he said, no, Rob, we was all laughing because you were stood near the teapot talking to yourself. And I'm like, and so I grabbed him by the throat and I was going to punch him and they dragged me off him because I thought he was taking the piss. And like, what, you're trying to make me look a fool or something. And he's like, Rob, there was nobody there. Never found that man. Never found him.
Oh my God.
Right. And the stuff that he taught me is just crazy. That's what my program's based on today.
All the way through that, when you were telling that story, I was just getting like a tingle throughout my entire body. That is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. So this guy obviously wasn't there, but something was there, and something took you through the book.
Yes, the only thing I think of now, and every time I say it, I cringe and hope my friends are not listening, but it had to be some sort of angel or something like that, because what I'd went through was horrendous. Yeah. But when I look back now, Ren, and I looked at my time on the street, and it was like a semester at flipping Harvard University. The stuff I learned, the stuff I use today when people come up and they go, hey, Rob, you don't know, you've never been homeless. And I go, let me tell you about it. You've never lost your kids. Let me tell you about it. You've never, and all this stuff that I've been through. It's like I have all this experience now because God was taking me through it. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. It's like when I was supposed to come over here, 3 or 4 days before I was come, I got everything out, the passport and everything. And the passport had expired. And I'm like, everything was booked, plane tickets and everything. It was a one-off when I came here. A church paid for me to come over. So I could never afford to come over here. So I jumped on the bus because I had no car, and I went to Liverpool, and I took all my stuff down and put it through. I think it was 5 days before I was supposed to fly. And the guy said, it's going to take at least 8 weeks. And that's just a passport. I said, well, can I, expedite it? And he said, yeah, it's going to be 4 weeks. And I just put it, I didn't expedite it. I just left it, Ren. And I come home and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I sat there for a couple of days. And the day before I was supposed to come, I was going to ring the guys in the afternoon and say, hey, I can't make it. And that morning there was a knocking on the door, and I went to the door and opened it, and the postman was there with my passport after 5 days. And all stuff like that was happening to me as I came over here. So I knew I had to be over here. And a bunch of more crazy stuff has happened where I've got well and, I had cancer, then it disappeared. And it's just been a walk with God in the sunlight of the Spirit, living the dream. That's all I can say. I don't know how else to explain it, man.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that because, I mean, if I'm honest with you as well, I'd watched a couple of the shows that you'd been on, and I'd listened to the podcast with Dennis Berry that you did recently, and I didn't get that side of the story. Like maybe you didn't go so much into the spiritual side of it. I kind of like got more of almost like a scientific perspective from you. So I'm really, really kind of like pleased that you've got this side to the story, because that's what I love. Like I love the kind of metaphysical, spiritual aspect of recovery. I think that there's something like, for my own personal experience, I mean, I went from being, just an egotistical maniac who wanted to be a famous DJ to somebody who is just all about this stuff now, all about recovery, all about helping people. And I just love these spiritual stories. So I'd love to hear how you got from there to where you are now.
Well, what happened is I started living with a friend of mine, and I was online with somebody just talking on a chat thing, and they were from a church in Dallas, Texas, and they said, "What you do?" And I said, "Well, I've just started this little practice about helping alcoholics and addicts." And because I got talking for a few weeks, they said, "Hey, our pastor in Dallas said he'll pay for you to come over here for like a week, and you can do some seminars because we got a big crack cocaine over here in a real affluent area." So I said, I'd love to do that. Go to America. I'd never been. I mean, I'm living on the dole just about seeing like one patient a week, if that, half price. It was I was in poverty, man. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I came over here. So they paid for my ticket and everything. So when I came over here, I stepped off the plane at the airport. And this weird feeling, and you'll know what I mean here, Ren, the weird feeling came over that I knew I was supposed to be here, and I was never going to go back home to live. I was always going to live here. Yeah. So what happened is I started doing a few seminars, and they said, hey, can we extend you for like 2 weeks? So I said, yeah. So they were paying for all my, put me up, everything, giving me money and everything. It was awesome. And then they got me to speak in this AA meeting, which was about 40 miles from where we were. So they took me down there, and this AA meeting was outside, Ren, and it was dark when I started speaking, and there was no lights, and it was windy, and the only light is when somebody walked past the security light, and it came on. So I couldn't see my book. I couldn't read my book. I had to talk from the heart, and I just spoke. I thought it was the worst talk I've ever done. I come off stage, and a guy walked up to me, and he said, hey, my name's such and such a buddy from this production company. We want to do some DVDs on you. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard this so many times. So I said, okay, that's my number. And the next day he called me. Now, bear in mind, I've only been in America for 10 days now. I got no money. I got nothing to go back to. I got nothing at all apart from this little speaking job, which what didn't pay, it just paid for all expenses. Yeah. So I said, okay, then. So he said, hey, we'll set it up. So then we extended it to a month over here. So I carried on working for the church. And then the production company came up with a contract to sign. So I signed the contract and everything. We went down to film. We did the filming in 2 days. It went out to all the prisons and institutes in America. They give me a check for $150,000 a week later, and I bought my first apartment and stayed here. Now, if you're trying to tell me that that's not spiritual or God working, I don't know what, because that was just, I mean, it just blew my mind. Just blew my mind. So then after a bit, like I set up a practice day. I got my psychology license in Texas. And then somebody called me. I mean, somebody just called the office. I could speak to Dr. Robb, and I got on. He said, "Hey, this is a producer from a show called The Doctors, and we go out to like 20 million people, and we want you to come on." And so I went on there, which I'm now a regular panelist, and now I have 5 practices around the world, and self-made millionaire, and just I drive crazy cars, dress crazy scrubs, I dye my hair blonde. I'm nearly 60. I don't give a shit. It's like I live life to the full.
Yeah, well, you just started off by doing the next right thing, and then all these things have come, haven't they? Like, it's almost like a magnet, really, for positivity, because you've got that aura about you. You've definitely exude passion for what you do, which is really wonderful to hear and to see as well. So, thanks for doing the things that you do. Can you talk to me about like your take on recovery and what you kind of like, how you specialize in the recovery field?
Well, what I specialize in myself is neuroplasticity, which is new neuroscience. So I study neuroscience, and it's all about neural pathways in the brain. I know for a fact today, there's a couple of things that most people probably don't know but should know about alcoholics. Number one, whenever there's alcoholism, there's always childhood trauma. Always.
Yeah.
So that's number one. We have to take that in mind. Secondly, I'm born as an alcoholic with self-sabotaging neural pathways, which means that anything that happens to me, good or bad, I will self-sabotage and bring it down. The book talks about this, building a bright life, then pulling the structure down, Also talks about a psychic change. 1939, they knew neural pathways needed to change.
Yeah.
Well, we only found this out in the medical fraternity 10 years ago, that we can remold the brain, So them guys knew what they were talking about back then. So that's what I specialize in, using neuro-linguistic programming, psychology, and I also have a psychotherapist and a bunch of other guys that work with me. So we have a program. This will blow people's minds. We have a 90-day program, 1 hour a day by telehealth. That means it's online, face-to-face with me. If you use or drink ever again, we'll refund your money. Nobody else in the world does that. Nobody does that. But we're that good because of going back to the John guy, because he passed this thing on to me, that I created this program called the 3D model, which is basically fear, abandonment, and shame. Once we work on that, go back to the scene of the crime when you was a kid and clear that up, along with 12-step work, and definitely the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first and second edition, which is public domain. We use that. I mean, after 20 years of being in college and school, after studying Carl Jung, of all the literature I've read, I've got to say that the best piece of literature for the recovering alcoholic and information about alcohol is the first 164 of the big book. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. So we use that along with neuroscience. That's what we do today.
Yeah, thankfully as well, it's now been proven due to research that Alcoholics Anonymous is the #1 solution for alcoholism as well. So I'm glad that they've cleared that up after many years of arguing back and forth.
Yeah, definitely.
So this program, I mean, essentially what I'm hearing is that you're reprogramming the brain.
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah, they're the first thing to get that. We're remapping the brain because it's been distorted with alcohol thinking and distorted from childhood abuse.
You're the first person really that I've ever heard kind of talk about this in a psychotherapeutic kind of sense, because I went down the route of psychedelics a couple of years ago. I did an ayahuasca retreat and some work with psilocybin, which for the same reason is, about rewiring the neural pathways. And actually, after those experiences, my first thought was, I'm sure this could be done in therapy. I'm sure that it could be done, but I wouldn't know where to begin. So what's the kind of, I know you said there's like the 3-pronged approach, but what would it typically look like if I was a client, for example? How would it work?
Well, the nice thing about the program we do is you don't know we're doing it, because the alcoholic brain is a very smart brain. So what happens is we work with you with NLP. So you'll spend an hour a day with me 5 days a week. And then you'll spend 2 days with my psychotherapist that goes back and does the inner child work with the ACA. There's a book out there, guys, called the ACA, the Adult Child of Alcoholics. If you haven't got it, couple it with the big book. It's phenomenal. So she does that work. I use the big book sometimes to refer to because it's a great piece of information. And basically, we're putting sentences and words into your subconscious mind that will come to fruition. One thing we found with alcoholics is alcoholism will never come to me on a Monday and go, hey, Rob, let's have a drink. It never does that. It's a week or a month before that I start to change. Now, here's an example of changing. I'm sat in the office. I'm looking across the room, and Julie in the corner is using a stupid Christmas pen that her mum bought her, and it's now July, and she's still using it. She's an idiot. It's stuff like that. That's my relapse right there. That thinking is my relapse. And that's where we catch them. So when someone comes to us and we manage their behavior, I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff you have to do. You have to check in 4 times a day, and it's all psychological. When you check in 4 times a day by text going, hey, everything's good, your brain resets. And we've got another few hours. And you're focused and you're right in the minute just for that time when you're checking in. Yeah. So that's important. It's got to be on time. It can't be late. It can't be early. It has to be on time. And then we're kind of redirecting neural pathways away from self-sabotaging neural pathways. So my self-sabotaging neural pathways are my knee-jerk reaction while I'm still suffering from untreated alcoholism. We change it round. So self-care neural pathways become the knee-jerk reaction. So therefore, the compulsion to drink or self-sabotage is taken away. That's the most important thing, is because if it isn't taken away, you're gonna relapse. Along with the psychic change and the what they call psychic changes, a change in neural pathways, and a spiritual experience, and this is our findings, your DNA changes. Now, people out there might go, "What's that? Why is that important?" The book says the same man will drink again. So I have to be different than when I come in. So what we do is, because we've changed that, your DNA changes. And you're a complete new different person, and your thinking is not the same. Now, if your thinking is not the same, you're not going to act the same. And basically at the back of the brain is the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus in the normal human being, it's a survival instinct. It's a fight or flight part of the brain. So what it tells the normal person is, hey, and this is from birth, you don't have to be taught it, you have to drink water and eat food to survive. That's why you'll often see a baby with their fingers in the mouth. It's an instinct. We don't have to teach kids to eat or drink. They know to do it straight away. But with the alcoholic, the hypothalamus is distorted. And what happens is it tells the alcoholic to drink alcohol. That's why an alcoholic can go days, if not weeks, without eating food or drinking water, because the brain's telling it the only thing you need is alcohol. Well, when you're up against your brain telling you the other part of the brain to do something, you don't stand a chance unless you understand how that works. Alcoholism is centered in the subconscious brain. And when I'm ready to relapse, way before I pick up the drink, my body, my behavior, and my language changes. What happens then is it comes from the subconscious brain down to the body while I start acting differently, up to the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex has one job. The job is to come up with a solution as fast as possible. And it does an amazing job. But because the hypothalamus is distorted and the mapping of the brain is distorted from self-sabotaging neural pathways and mapping as a child abuse, the prefrontal cortex tells the alcoholic to drink. And that's why we call it a disease, because we don't have any control when we relapse or when we take a drink. There's no such thing as a choice unless you do the program and recovered from the disease of alcoholism. I'm recovered from the disease. And I hear people say all the time, well, yeah, but you're not cured. No, you don't understand. Alcoholism is like food poisoning, and the common cold. There is no cure. But each year I take certain steps to make sure that I never had food poisoning again and I never get the common cold. And it's the same with alcoholism. I work a few steps to make sure that I never suffer from alcoholism again. I'm still an alcoholic and I'll always be an alcoholic. But the thing that people don't realize out there is the alcoholic brain is one of the smartest brains in the world.
Yeah, so the way I talk about it is I say I'm recovered from a hopeless state of body and mind, and I'm in recovery from what we call the spiritual malady. And what you've just said there, I mean, I've not had a drink now for over 10 years, and everything that you've just said makes perfect sense to me. But what's come in is I'm thinking, well, I have those same behaviors with food, for example, or it might be, I don't know, going to the gym or gambling or whatever. So does the what the effect on the brain from the trauma when you're a child, does that mean that it's what's the word I'm looking for, that it relates to all addictions? So
well, yes and no, and I'll tell you why it is. Alcoholism is different to drug addiction. Alcohol reacts different to the brain than drugs do. And this is what we believe. You cannot drink yourself into becoming an alcoholic. Now, you can abuse alcohol. It's a different matter completely. But you cannot drink yourself into becoming an alcoholic. You're already born that way. Now, with drugs, you can take as much drugs over a period of time that you can become reliant upon them drugs. And because you're reliant, it becomes a habit. And because it becomes a habit, it becomes addiction. So you can get addicted. So there's certain ways. You don't have to be a drug addict to become a drug addict, if you know what I mean. If you are not a drug addict but start taking drugs, you can become a drug addict. If you're not an alcoholic and start drinking alcohol, you will not become an alcoholic unless it's in your genes. Therefore, you can trace it back through the families. Does that make sense? Whereas a drug addict, parents don't take drugs. Grandfather doesn't take drugs. But little Tim here has become a drug addict. Why? It's not hereditary. Drug addiction is not hereditary. Alcoholism is. I mean, isn't that amazing news? This is brand new neuroscience you're getting on this show. This show needs to hit 5 million viewers with this shit that I'm coming out with.
I hope it will do, Rob. I hope it will do. I mean, I have to be completely straight with you. Like, that is absolute news to me, because that is something that I definitely didn't know, and I would have argued against. If I wasn't speaking to you about it, I would have argued against that. I would have always said that it doesn't matter what the substance or behaviour is, that anybody could become an addict. That's what I would have said.
Yeah, they can become an addict, but just the alcohol reacts differently. And yeah, the end result is, and there's a slight difference between the alcohol and drug addicts. But when it comes to the actual disease, once the person gets the disease, the addiction or alcoholism, it then reunites. So what the emphasis is on, you can't become a drug addict if it's not in your genes. You can't become an alcoholic if it's not in your genes. But once you are, and once you are addicted, it kind of comes together. So then the drugs and the alcohol and the food and the sex and the gambling becomes the symptom of the disease.
Yeah.
So I want to make that clear, that once we have the disease, either through abusing alcohol or abusing drugs, once you are an alcoholic or become a drug addict, the disease gets then fused, that it's all one thing. The symptom is, and we can mention anything we want, because now it sits in, the disease sits in my brain. The book talks about, the sickness of the body, the mental obsession with the physical allergy. Yeah. So once the mental obsession is taking place in the drug addict or alcoholic, the end result and the actual disease is exactly the same. And that's where you can't distinguish between both. It all become one. That's why AA started letting NA in and NAAA in, because once you have the disease, it's all the same. It's actually going through the process that's slightly different.
I think the confusing thing about it is, especially for somebody who isn't an alcoholic or an addict, is the word disease, because the way I'm thinking about it now, from the way you've just described it, is essentially your brain is wired in a certain way, and once it's wired that way, as in your neural pathways have been grooved into that to those addictions, basically to those habitual and compulsive behaviours, that you then have to rewire it, and it'll just be like that with every substance and with every behaviour. I mean, I always talk about addiction like a game of whack-a-mole. You whack one down and it pops up in another area, because that's been my experience. I've had a plethora of addictions across the board, really, but as I've got progressively more well in recovery, and that's through, as I said, like the 12 steps, psychedelics, psychotherapy. I've done everything, life coaching, you name it. I've got progressively more well, and I think I'm essentially rewiring my brain. Is that right?
Correct. That's exactly what it is. And information and knowledge about addiction is 9/10 of the law where we come from, because the more knowledge you have, the more things you look for. You see, I've seen people come off drugs, but they spend every single day in the gym, like 7 or 8 hours in the gym. I mean, we say to people, you might as well be drinking, because your family don't see you and your kids don't see you. You just swap one addiction for the other. But
Yeah.
knowledge that you can swap addictions becomes of prime importance then, because then you can watch it.
Yeah.
So addiction and alcoholism is all about our brain and what we're going to do with it and which way we're going to go with it. Anything in moderation is amazing. Anything to excess becomes an addiction.
When we look at society now, I mean, especially the situation as it is in the world, you know, obviously a lot of people are stuck at home, and especially the young kids are stuck at home and they're all on their iPads and their computers and, you know, whatever else. It seems to me as though addiction on a kind of scale is kind of ubiquitous, really. People seem to be susceptible to addiction in all different types of behaviours. How do we get this message out to people, and how can we essentially start to change the frame of mind of the general public about addiction?
Unfortunately, it still looks at a dirty disease, and we're still trying to drag it out of the cupboard. And although we're succeeding, we are. The thing is, we've got to watch, guys, is the new generation coming up. You see, what happens is if your kids sat at the same table as you, whether you're out to dinner or whether you're sat at home, if they're sat with people around the table and they're texting somebody else who's not there, we have a problem. So, you know, we need to look at this, not only alcoholism and drugs, but there's also iPhone addiction, there's also internet addiction, gaming addiction. It's all the same stuff. And what happens is it might not be so devastating over a short period of time, but it is devastating over a long period of time, because what happens is the new generation coming up has no social skills. Now, what happens when you don't have any social skills is you tend to isolate more. The best thing to do when you isolate is to drink or play games or text people. And it all starts to mesh into one single thing. So as a society, we need to really look of how we're bringing up our kids and how we can fix this problem, you know, of not isolating. And COVID did us no favors. Alcohol sales in Texas went up by 33%. The businesses, the off license over here was essential businesses. They had to stay open. I mean, that tells you everything about alcoholism. Is they can't close it, the liquor stores down or the off licenses because people need it, you know. And we have an epidemic on our hands. We can't see it coming. It was like crack cocaine. You know, and crystal meth is, we don't see it coming until it starts hitting the affluent people. And then they start saying we've got a problem. We had a problem 20 years ago about crack cocaine, but nobody was listening to us.
Yeah, because the minorities were the only ones that were using it at the time.
Exactly.
What's your thoughts on the cannabis situation in the US?
Wow. There's a couple of thoughts that, I mean, God, I've got mixed feelings on this. I mean, I think something like 7 or 8 states have now legally sell cannabis. And, you know, there's been links. This is what we do. This is our research. People say the cannabis does you no harm. You never see a cannabis user kicking off in the pub or hitting somebody or smashing the wife. No, we don't see that. But these are my records kept over 20 odd years, my records that state that every alcoholic and drug addict that ends up in my office started on marijuana and then pills from the doctor, pain pills, or marijuana and alcohol. So do we look at marijuana as a gateway drug? So here's my take on that. If you are a normal person that doesn't suffer from addiction, I think marijuana is safe to use. It's not going to lead to anything, and it's fine. It's got a plethora, like you said, of healing resources that we can use. I've lost how many cancer patients do it. So that's said and done. Now, if you're an addict or you're easily get addicted and have the addictive brain, cannabis will lead to other stuff and probably end up on hardcore drugs or chronic alcoholism. That's just the findings that we found.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I started on cannabis and alcohol and then just progressed, and the majority of people that I hung around with did exactly the same thing. It's kind of like a disaster waiting to happen. I think that we won't really see the effects of that until probably for another 20 odd years, and then it'll be kind of like, we've made a bit of a mistake here. But then at the same time, actually, I shouldn't have said that we've made a mistake, because I think at the same time, I think that every adult should have the right to take whatever they want, really. I think Oh, well, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I'm starting to think more and more that if drugs were just legalized, but education was improved, and I'm talking about education for kids at a very young age around drugs, was improved, then that would probably solve the problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, education is one of the main things. I mean, I was on the doctors a couple of months ago, and we're talking about legalizes offices within doctor's office where people can shoot heroin. And most people kicked off and like, oh my God, are you crazy? Well, let's think about that for a second. Would you rather an addict stick his needle into a safe box with inside an office, or leave it on a back street for your kid to find? That's one part of the story. The second one is, if you have counselors in there or 12-step people while these guys are going in safely to do this, can you imagine the dialogue? Can you imagine if we save one life out of 1 million, the one life would be worth saving?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I'm a huge advocate for that. I work for a substance misuse organisation in Birmingham in the UK, and I've been talking about that for a long time. I think it would be the answer in exactly the way that you've just said it. I mean, ultimately, there's always going to be the vast majority of people that are alcoholics and addicts that aren't going to get it and are going to die, unfortunately. But just to save that one life out of 1 million, like you said, is 100% worth it. And I think that as homelessness is getting worse and worse in both the UK and the States, people are seeing it more and more now in the face. And obviously, you've got experience of being on the streets yourself. How did it feel when you were on the streets and you know, when you were looking from that perspective outwards from the gutter upwards?
Saw a lot of things you wouldn't normally see. That's for sure. But I saw the devastation of the real addiction and alcohol problem, because what the normal person sees is if it's in their own family or a friend that suffers and they go off to treatment, what they don't see is the amount of people that become homeless, the broken families, you know, the distraught wives, all this stuff, the damage that we do. I know that my alcoholism was like a contagious disease. It affected everybody that I came across, And you don't see that until you go down to the depths that I went, because you just don't see it, you know? And my mission has always been the same, Ren. And for me, you know, all the stuff I do on TV, all the books and everything, all the fame I have over here, you know, all the celebrities that I work with, pays the mortgage and keeps my wife happy. If I was going to be completely honest, what I do is I stay on the streets. I'm in the trenches every day. I'm in the gutters every day working with people. If I'm on with a patient and all of a sudden a sponsee calls, the patient gets dropped for 10 minutes while I speak to the sponsee, because I know what it's like. I've seen things that other people haven't seen when you're on the streets and you see the violence and you see the distraught. I mean, I always ask this person when I was on the streets, did you want to become a drug addict and become homeless? Nobody said yes. Everybody says, hell no. Do you know what I met on the streets? I met psychologists. I met heart doctors. I met, you know, teachers, bus drivers. I met people from all walks of life. And because of addiction and no help or embarrassment, you know, sugarcoating this shit kills people, you know, they end up on the streets. And sometimes, you know, the percentage of getting off the streets in Manchester in the United Kingdom is 3% success. 97% die on the streets.
Yeah,
I mean, people need to realize this. You know, I'm so lucky of it being that one of the 3% to come on. I know 6 or 7 other people I hung with that are dead. 3 of them died when I was there in front of me. I mean, people don't see this, you know. They're like, oh, well, alcoholism or addiction, it's not that bad. Guys, it's bad. It's always been bad. It's alcohol. And we did a research over here just near Dallas. A hospital let us do research on a Friday and Saturday night. 97% of people coming through the doors had alcohol or drugs in them to excess, which caused the accident they were there in the hospital for. Now, that tells us something. If we look on death row alone, 40% of people on death row do not know about the crime they committed. They can't recollect it because they were drunk or high or on drugs. This is the problem we have. You know, it's like people don't realize how horrible this disease is. You know, from my research, and this is my research, guys, it's not World Health Organization, alcoholism and drug addiction kills more people than cancer, heart disease, and diabetes put together.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane, isn't it? I mean, I I think I've been thinking about this for many years now, and I think it is literally the number one health problem in the world.
And do you know why that is, Ren?
Why?
Because there's no money in people getting well.
Yeah.
There's no money in people, over here, it's a joke. We offer a money back guarantee. Nobody does that. Why? Because they're still taking little Johnny in for his 7th time round, still charging him 30 grand a month to go in. The success rate is less than 3% of any treatment center in the US. People don't care. The pharmaceutical companies are dishing out drugs left, right, and center. They haven't got a cure for alcoholism and addiction. They don't want one of those. They'd rather give you pain meds for a period of time, get the money off that, and then send you to the streets for heroin. Because 99%, 99% of people that come to me with a chronic heroin addiction started on pain meds from the doctor. What the hell's that all about?
Yeah, I know, it's absolutely insane. One of the things I just wanted to touch on, because I know we're getting close towards the hour, is the adverse childhood experiences. So, we've talked about obviously the devastation of addiction especially when it gets to the dependent levels and homelessness. What were your adverse childhood experiences first and foremost, and how do you see that they progress to what we've been talking about?
Well, sex molestation. I can't forget the English word, but I was abused by my priest. I was abused by my headmaster, and I was abused by a guy that lived across the road from us. And my parents knew about 2 of them and did nothing about it, because you couldn't go against a priest when I was a kid. It was just absolutely terrible. You couldn't do it. So the bringing up of that, the harmful and unfavorable effects from that, marks me down to have the self-sabotage neural pathways, because I'm going to try and kill myself at every opportunity because of what's happened to me in the past. And I have the alcoholic brain, which is already wants to kill me and make you look like an accident. So all that stuff. But one thing we have to remember, guys, and this is for the addicted or alcoholic brain, how do we define child abuse? Well, let me tell you, this is our saying here at Robb Kelly Recovery Group. Anything less than nurturing as a child is child abuse. Get down off there, you stupid idiot. How many times have I told you, clown? No, you're too stupid to do that. This stuff the addicted brain will take on board. And it will store like a zip file on a computer. And one day, just nonchalantly going around your computer, you click on this zip file and the shit just pours out. And you cannot cope with it all at once. It's like people say, if God would only show you what was around you. If our eyes can see about 3% of what's around us. If our eyes could see 100%, we'd go insane. We would go insane at what we can see. Yeah. Diseases all over us and germs all over us and creeping things all over our body. It would take us into insanity. You got to look back at the childhood and find out the adverse effects that's happened to every alcoholic and most addicts, to be honest. Broken families, one-parent families, the poverty. Yeah. These are all things that play. And it was with we lived on a racecourse estate, man. We couldn't afford nothing. I couldn't afford to go on school trips when everyone else went. I was the guy left behind waving at the bus. That's never. I couldn't even go to Tatton Park with my class because the mum and dad couldn't afford it. Hey, but they could afford to go out on a Friday and Saturday night to the pub. It's all that shit as a kid that now comes to fruition as an alcoholic that came all at once for me and made me end up homeless. It's like people don't understand this. Our mind is very clever, but it's overloaded. We don't stand a chance. I committed suicide twice successfully on the side of the road. One in Piccadilly Gardens, one just off Rochdale Road, where I died on the streets and they brought me back to life. The ambulance men I was so pissed at them guys because I couldn't live anymore. And all of it was from my childhood abuse that I'd never, ever approached it. I didn't know anything about inner child work. I didn't know that there was childhood abuse until I went back and did the work. I used to go to school with holes in my socks and holes in my shoes with cardboard on it in the snow. And a counsellor pointed out to me, she says, do you think your mum and dad, when they went out every Friday and Saturday night, had holes in their socks? And I'm like, no, they didn't. What the hell's that? That's childhood abuse there, Ren. That's childhood abuse. Yeah. And I didn't know that. I thought childhood abuse was being starved to death or beaten or sexually. It can be anything that puts another child down. I was left to fight my own battles. you know. We did an exchange student once. I went to his house, you know, whatever it was in London, beautiful house, middle-class family. He come back to my house. My parents wasn't even there when I brought him home. There was no food. I had to knock next door to see if they had any bread so I could make him some toast. That's childhood abuse. That affected me for years and years and years. I was embarrassed about my family because of what they did to me.
Just neglect, isn't it? Just total neglect.
It was, and I used to be embarrassed, man. When people used to say, oh, my dad's picking us up for football practice tonight, we'll pick you up at home. I told them I lived about a mile away on the posh estates. I would never tell them where I come from. I was so embarrassed where I come from. You know, it was unreal. I just think that parents, my generation, and I'm 59, my generation of parents dropped the ball somewhere. I don't know whether that was the war. I don't know what it was. But guys, you fed in to the addiction and alcohol problem we have today. I'm sorry, but you did.
Yeah, and this is, I think, where it needs to start, like we've spoken about with education. I mean, ultimately, like education of parents and education at school for the kids to understand these issues and understand how, you know, how they're being neglected and the trauma that creates, because it is definitely not understood, is it? I mean, like this conversation that we're having right now is not the standard conversation that happens in my circle of friends, family, etc., you know, and in the wider society.
It's true. And you know what I always get told, Rob, you say the things other people are thinking. And I'm like, yeah, I saw a thing the other day, and it's like the controversial doctor from Texas. I'm like, screw you, I ain't controversial. I just don't mind telling people as it is, because people are keeping quiet out there because they just want to be politically correct these days. It's like, no. This stuff's going on, and we need to start talking about this stuff, because if we don't, there's going to be no trouble down the line. The only sane people I know right now, Ran, are people in a 12-step program. I've got to be real honest with you. My wife's losing her shit right now because she thinks the world's coming to an end. There's people in downtown, they've got guns, and they're trying to take over, you know, places. We're allowed to have guns over here. I have like 6 guns in the house. If they come to my house, I'm going to start killing some people. My wife's freaking out. You know, but I'm saying, because I'm in a 12-step program, you know, fear and being scared and under attack and isolation because of COVID, that's where I come from. That's my language right there. So I'm the same one in this house for the first time ever because of everything that's going on. It's crazy.
Rob, you need to get onto the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, because you've got the reach and you've got the message.
I'm trying my best to get onto Joe Rogan. My girl keeps calling him.
He's just moved to Texas, so you've got to get on the show. I mean, I listen to it religiously, and I think that you've got the reach to be able to get on there. And he is very misguided when it comes to addiction. He doesn't. He loves talking about it. He loves talking about spirituality, but he doesn't really understand it. And I think that you going on that show would be the platform to get it out there to people, so that people would start to understand that this is a global problem and we need to start taking it really, really seriously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been doing this for the 13, 14 years that I've been in the US, and we're making a dent, you know, because as you can tell, I'm not one for keeping quiet when we're talking about addiction. I'm the one screaming and shouting and getting attention, because the squeaky cog gets the attention. I'm that squeaky cog. But, you know, on a serious note, you know, that one guy that saved me on the back streets of Manchester for the last 30 odd years, I've been that one guy. I've been that one guy that doesn't give up on anybody, you know. Yeah. I used to hear in meetings, don't mess with Robb Kelly, he's a waste of time, he's going to die. I used to go to the Oldham Street meeting, I hear that. Oh, don't, if he asks you to sponsor, just say no, he's going to die, he's a waste of time. I heard that shit, you know. So when I was on the street, the abandonment was rife with me. And I just don't want anybody to go through that. It's unreal. I'm so blessed to be doing what I'm doing, man. I'm telling you.
So you're still active in the rooms then, in AA and fellowships? Is that still the case?
Yeah, I speak around the world. I speak around the world on behalf of AA. Yeah. I chair a couple of meetings a week. I do online meetings. I join one of those. We have a bunch of guys that live in the big book that go around, and we educate young kids when they come in the room, saying, hey, don't listen to this crap they're telling you, that you can't recover from this stuff and you have to do a step a month and all that. We go, no, this got to be done really quick. This has got to be done. Like, I mean, people say in rooms like, don't be so hard on yourself, Rob. It's like, no, the book says we must always be hard on ourselves, but considerate of others. And it's stuff like this that we teach that I got from John.
What does life in recovery mean to you, Rob?
It means peace. It means helping people. I have to compliment 3 people a day. If I'm driving past a gas station and I see a woman there with 10 kids in the back and she's trying to squeeze $2, I'm filling a car full of gas. That's why God's given me wealth. We spent $250,000 last year on one parent families in recovery. We buy cars, we send them on vacations, we sponsor kids going to school. We do all this stuff that we give back to the community, and that's part of my recovery today. I don't do it to show off. Many of the times nobody even knows we're doing it. I just know that it keeps me on the straight and narrow today, and that life is beautiful. And I always say to people, they say, "How you doing, Rob?" Because I remember when I was on the streets, when I walked past houses, I used to dream of being in that house having dinner with them. So today I'm living the dream instead of dreaming of living.
Beautiful, man. How do you tackle the kind of anonymity aspect of things? Because this is something that I've recently kind of toyed with, and ultimately I've now exposed myself. I've now come out of the closet, so to speak, because I used to remain anonymous, but it's a decision that I've made now, and I think the reason behind it is because I think I can help more people this way.
That's the same with me. I always introduce as my name's Robb Kelly. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And people say, well, you're supposed to give your first name. Well, first of all, I tell them a nasty word to go away. And secondly, if you want Robb Kelly to help you, you look for Robb Kelly. Don't look for Robb K. Who the hell's he? I stopped being anonymous when I came over here 14 years ago. But I do respect everyone else's anonymity, but I'm not anonymous. When you just go online, Google me, I'm all over the place. I'm the one you can turn to when you want to keep a secret. We worked with Robert Downey Jr. is one of my guys. Eminem was my guy. He coming up with, and Eddie Van Halen. They're all guys who said I could mention them to radio shows that I go on in recovery. They're the guys that I kind of help because I'm out there. I don't mind being out there. It's like, here I am. Come and find me. I can help you.
That must have been a bit of a trip working with Eminem and Robert Downey Jr.
Well, Robert Downey Jr. thought he was all that when we picked him up from jail, so we soon slapped him into shape. And Nigel was just one of the unbelievable nicest guys I could ever wish to meet.
Unbelievable. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And where can we find you online? Can you give us your website address and social medias as well?
Yeah, well, I'm an alcoholic, so I spell my name with 2 B's, ROBBKELLY.com, RobbKelly.com. Dr. Robb Kelly on social media. Google Robb Kelly or Dr. Robb Kelly, you'll find me. And if you're on Amazon, lazily just running around, if you go to Daddy, Please Stop Drinking or Dr. Robb Kelly, there's a book on there you can buy. Not all the profits, but all the proceeds from that book go back into communities around the world. We stuck 20 grand into Manchester last year alone to help people. So there it is. The other thing I want to leave you as well, guys, I am in San Antonio, Texas. So if you are in England and you want a 10-minute chat to boost your day, 214-600-0210 is my personal cell phone number. Just put the code on it before you call America. If you want a chat that will change your day, call me. It's not going to cost you anything. It's one alcoholic to another just for this show.
That's beautiful, mate. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been an honour speaking to you, and hopefully I'll get to speak to you again at some point in the future, maybe after you've been on Rogan.
Sounds good. Excellent. I'm going to make that my next. I want to get my girl on that straight away, Ren.
Cheers, man. That's brilliant.
Thanks very much for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, just look underneath the podcast at a range of links to mutual aid organisations. Please don't forget that you can support the podcast at patreon.com/lifeinrecovery. And if you go to the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk, you'll see links to all my social media and all my books. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.